Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's continue our game of Hermitage Strange Case Files on Nintendo Switch. That's weird jazz music. It actually reminds me a lot of Famicom Detective Club as far as like the setting. Obviously not the art style and the story. Making sense, but everything else kind of gives that Famicom Detective Club vibe. Cecile is walking down the hallway. Opening hours are long over, and the club is completely silent at night. It's dark, but she knows this place so well that she could navigate it with her eyes closed. Weird how you can become so familiar with a place over time without really noticing. Ever since the day of her transfer, all she longed for was a warm and welcoming home. Today, that wish had been half fulfilled. The art club is dipped in darkness, a familiar sight for Cecile. Whenever no one else was around, this place served as a safe haven for Cecile and Eloise. Whatever happened here, Cecile will never forget those memories. That's the way things should be. Cecile. Eloise is standing there, as familiar as ever. But no matter how hard she tries, Cecile doesn't feel pleased about it like she did in the past. Maybe the store manager got something wrong, Cecile tries to tell herself. But he did everything he could to get to the bottom of it all, and he never left the store. He always had her best interests in mind. Cecile can't possibly turn a deaf ear to what he's been saying. Also, Eloise never tried to deny it. That's what causes Cecile the most distress. However, she can't stop her thoughts either. It's like saying, if I could do it all over again, I would do the same thing. A few rays of moonlight light up Eloise's outline. The unbearable silence weighs heavy on Cecile. So, this is it. Nothing remains hidden for you as long as it seems. Eloise gently brushes the paintings on the wall, her face buried in the surrounding darkness. For an outsider, the store manager's instincts sure are sharp. Or was it also obvious when I first came to the store? She sighs as if nothing matters anymore anyway. Eloise, you're here now. Things can't possibly get any worse. Say what you have to say, Cecile. Eloise turns around and looks directly into Cecile's eyes. From the outside, she is as calm as always, but Cecile knows her well enough to see through it. Eloise has given up hope. The past is the past. There's something more important that I need to know about. Please answer me honestly, Eloise. Cecile takes out her phone and shows Eloise the screen. Before she entered the classroom, she activated the stopwatch on her phone. What time is it now? Huh? All she has to do is read out the numbers on the screen, yet Eloise seems baffled and doesn't respond. She turns away, looking sadder by the second. I guessed as much. A wave of negative emotions overcomes Cecile. Eloise, you've seen it too. After awakening from one of her hallucinations, Cecile experienced the same exact symptom. Even after she was free of those eyes, the memory still left her trembling. Time didn't align correctly anymore. It might just be a minuscule difference of tens of seconds, but the sequence of time is now completely mixed up for Eloise. Looking at the wall clock, she can see the needle trembling frantically, as if unsure which direction time is supposed to flow. This explains why Eloise can't read the time, even if she wanted to. Are you being targeted? Eloise nods slowly. It was close behind me just seconds before I woke up. How much longer? About a day, I'd say. I see. Somehow she can feel the entity's shadow steps coming closer. Is this some kind of benevolent gift, pure luck, or a twisted hunting game for the shadow creature? Cecile doesn't have an answer to any of it right now. Let's run away. Together. She puts away her phone and grabs Eloise's hands. Eloise's hands are as warm as ever, giving Cecile a sense of familiarity. No. However, Eloise refuses the kind gesture. I deserve it. It's time to let it come for me. We don't have time for this. Eloise, do you even know how dangerous that thing is? Yes, I can feel it. Truthfully, I expected it to be worse. Eloise's words make Cecile stop in her tracks. Eloise, what are you talking about? You know, that girl was always the worst at landscape paintings at first. Some people's spatial awareness isn't naturally keen, even if their basic skills are above average. Those kinds of paintings require perspective knowledge, or else they'll look off. If something was right in front of her, she could replicate it better than anyone else, but otherwise she couldn't even get the pattern on the floor straight until the end of last summer. Suddenly, the teacher was praising her advanced style. What do you think that was? Hannah, Amelia, Faith, Evelyn. One name after another leaves her lips. Though she doesn't know their faces, Cecile has heard those names in the art club before. It's hard to find a true friend to talk to, isn't it? It shouldn't be. After all I've done, it's only natural that my punishment is severe. I messed up. Eloise raises her left hand, as if trying to touch Cecile's face, but stops herself at the last second. Cecile, you should go back. That store manager seems to know a lot of things, and he'll find a way to help you. Tears form in her eyes, but Eloise's words remain firm. You can stop worrying about me disappointing you anymore. Let's go back, together. What if I say no? Why would you? His assumptions were completely right. I can't even look at myself. I'm a rotten person. There's so much more you'll be able to do in the future, but it's best for everyone if my story ends here. What are you talking about? Let's get out of here. We can talk more about it later. Cecile grabs Eloise's hand and tries to drag her out of the classroom, but Eloise remains where she is and shows no sign of wavering. The harder Cecile tries, the more she can feel an air of despair taking over the room. There's fear in Eloise's face. As Cecile pulls on her arm, Eloise's expression turns angry. What's wrong with you? Do you think you're a saint? Leave me alone. I'm ready for this, and you're not in charge here. Sometimes we act before we think. For the first time in her young life, Cecile slaps someone. Eloise covers her cheek in surprise. Stop saying you're ready as if that means anything. I know I'm repeating myself. I know I'm probably annoying you. But if that's the only way to get through to you, so be it. Cecile. So you're sorry? You just want to leave things this way? How can you even think like that? But it's the only... Shut up! There's never just an only way. Am I angry? Of course I am. I hate this. But this is not the way. This isn't closure. Nobody wins. Her throat hurts. She can't remember ever shouting this much before. It takes her nearly a minute to catch her breath, and during that time, the only sound in the room is her strained breathing. I know you won't forgive yourself easily, Eloise. Cecile's voice is slower and more controlled now. A glimmer of light is dancing in her eyes. I won't sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to lie. After everything you've done, I'm unsure about the future. I don't know what to think. But what I do know is that you still mean a lot to me. Giving up here isn't doing anybody any favors. The Eloise I know is smarter than that, stronger than that. The girl I know doesn't shy away from a fight. She faces any problem head on. Cecile grabs Eloise's shoulders. This time, Eloise doesn't resist. I'll talk to the store manager tomorrow morning. I'll ask for help and find a way to deal with this. But it'll be dangerous if I'm on my own. That thing almost tore me into pieces a couple times while it was chasing after me. You should know how dangerous it is. So, I may get hurt. I may go crazy, or I may die. But I want to survive. I won't give up, and I want to live a good life and find some closure. For you as well as for me. After speaking her mind, she lets go of the stunned Eloise and turns around, preparing to leave. Please, help me. Cecile says these last words without turning around. The once rebellious Eloise looks at that open door and slowly sinks into a corner. This night is bound to be a sleepless one. Wow, I really pulled an all-nighter, didn't I? Good morning, Mr. Store Manager. Hold on a second. I wave my hand and pull a watch out of a drawer. Yesterday, something occurred to me. Putting aside that monster for a moment, you inhale so much incense in one breath, it won't simply go away. Anyway, I'd like to give this a try. I can't read the time. She answers before I even have a chance to explain. Huh? You guessed right, and time's jumping more and more. So it's true. How did you find out? Well, that's a long story. But it's for the same reason I was able to guess that you're coming over today. We should wait until everyone's here before I explain the... Huh? Her eyes are darting around the room. She looks pale. Wait a minute. Could it be possible that... I spoke to her, but she's still hesitant. Am I being too idealistic? I rub a hand against my forehead and try to keep myself calm. It's going to be a lot more difficult without Eloise around. What are you hoping to learn from her? I just stumbled upon a few things yesterday that could be potential lifesavers, but we need to work as a group to piece it all together. I see. Cecile smiles bitterly. She hasn't tried to contact you? No. Once she makes a decision, she sticks by it. She won't change her mind. Is there really no hope? I wouldn't say that. Cecile looks towards the door. I think she listened to what I said yesterday. Realizing how much trouble you caused others along the way by acting blindly must be an unbearable guilt. I can relate to how she feels. I find it difficult to imagine how a well-behaved, smart girl such as Cecile could relate to that. She'll come around. She murmurs to herself. I know her. I did the right thing coming here, didn't I? A tall figure steps into the light. Eloise walks up and stands next to Cecile. Eloise? After a sudden burst of joy, Cecile's expression suddenly becomes more stern again. Unspoken emotions are looming on both of their faces. There's no way around this. Alright, now that we're all together, let's discuss the plan. There's one thing I need you two to confirm. Considering the limited time we have and the bunch of things that need to be prepared, I decided not to beat around the bush. It will come today. Is that right? It feels as if you understand the situation better than we do. They both throw me a quizzical look. All I can do is scratch my head. Well, I want to wait for both of you to be here before explaining everything. As for Scarlet, she's already in the know. For what it's worth, we may not be the first victims to have come into contact with that monster. Rather, this thing seems to have appeared several times before, always posing a considerable threat. Several times? But why? Searching for longevity or enlightenment, waiting to escape the confines of the material world. What was most associated with these things in ancient China? All of that sounds very familiar to the concept of Taoism, doesn't it? The two girls look at each other. I pick up Chronicles of the Crane Temple and hand it to them. Scaly silkworm, a name Cecile should be familiar with. That's how the ancient priests referred to it. After having been ravaged by the creature, the particular temple described in this book crumbled because of a lack of practitioners. The monster attacked during a great ceremony. Almost everyone attending it was slaughtered. Blood and severed limbs littered the room. Most of the bodies were disfigured and had huge chunks missing from their heads. I don't mean to scare you. It was just a gnarly scene. I stop and slowly take a sip of water. My hands are shaking, and I try to hide it as best as I can. The details are terrifying, but I think the two girls are scared enough already. If the plan is successful, such a tragedy can be averted. If the plan fails... So, in short, that monster has appeared before. Wow. Cecile looks surprised, while Eloise is staring at the ancient book. Even for a girl who's adept at learning, understanding the obscure writing style in that book is no easy task. There seems to be no record of what you said in here. That scene you described, is it in another book or something? Keep looking. Huh? It says afterwards, in the following years, a surviving Crane Temple Taoist tried to raise money in the countryside to recruit new apprentices. But he didn't seem content with the results. It went on for more than 10 years. Eloise rubs her eyes and her face turns strangely pale. Hey, what's wrong? Why are there these numbers? Eloise's reaction to it is even greater than anticipated. She closes her eyes, shivering, before finally calming down again. Up until now, Chronicles of the Crane Temple was just a book that helped me get some facts straight. But now I know that the key to your survival lies hidden within its pages. Fighting the nausea that's been choking me since yesterday, I forced myself to go on. This page is dedicated to the surviving Crane Temple Taoist. He was just an ordinary Taoist priest at the time, and his name was unknown. He inherited a secret recipe, passed down to him by his ancestors. They made use of a special elixir to catch a glimpse of what they called the Great Path. This knowledge was passed on to devoted practitioners, so they too could make this experience. The fatal incident in which the creature attacked happened during a ceremony in which they had all gathered to walk the Great Path. It happened right before it was the unknown monk's turn. So, they really used lilac grass. The description matches the experience one would go through when exposed to a very high dose of incense. I doubt there is a way to guarantee one's safety, but they never used it without supervision. Those were safer conditions than you had. And yet things still went wrthem. Their elders would teach them a formula beforehand. More of a song, really. Chanting it collectively seems to have been the only way to make the scaly silkworm leave them be during their spiritual voyage. His elder brother was so anxious that he snuck into the temple to get the elixir, and you know what happened then. It started with a stare. The Crane Temple Taoists believed that this monster could be appeased if it hadn't been around for too long. Anyway, back to the story. After the elder brother did not survive at the ceremony on that time, a group of disciples descended to go to his room to see what was going on. They were met with a gory sight, a body reduced to a pile of flesh. Then the scaly silkworm emerged from a shadowy corner of the room and went on a killing spree. Starting with the Tempest Elder, it massacred one after another. The Crane Temple Taoist hid beneath the corpse and dared not move or look. He repeated the chant over and over again in a whisper, as fast as he could. Repeating it 3 times, the aura of despair and dread surrounded him finally disappeared. Honestly, I'm not too sure if the chant was really what saved him in the end, or if the fact that he hadn't consumed the elixir yet just didn't make him a target in the creature's eyes. But right now, we don't have any other options. It's a risk worth taking. There are some more useful details in there, describing how the creature is extremely fast and good at keeping out of sight. But the most important thing is probably the chant. That doesn't sound very realistic. Cecile smiles helplessly, but doesn't say anything else. Despite her life-threatening situation, she's thinking calmly and logically. Good at hiding, moves quickly. Eloise raises 2 fingers. But where are we going to find that chant? All that aside, there's only 1 page here. You really got all that from a single page? Well, I take the ancient book from Eloise and placed it back in a drawer. I don't know if you've ever been interested in witchcraft, but chanting is an important aspect that has been passed down from generation to generation. Some of these tunes are just ordinary ones, meant to sound spooky, while others contain real things. Of course, the word real is relative, as none of them can be explained scientifically. Create an appropriate ambience and help people fall into a deep slumber, a trance-like state. It's a little like hypnosis, but more powerful. It's a rare skill, but nothing unique. As an anthropological researcher, various religions and occult rites caught my interest over the years. It's obvious to me that these Taoist priests had actual skill and knowledge. It's not just foolish trickery. There's a lot of hidden meaning in this mysterious text. If you look at those numbers more closely, don't you think their arrangement is strange? Only from 1 to 5. Wait a minute. 5? Gong, Shang, Hu, Shi, Yu. 5 notes on the pentatonic scale. Correct. It's a very smart way of encrypting information. Once you understand it, it becomes obvious that what we're looking for is in plain sight. These numbers are the chant we need. Whoa. Unbelievable. How did you do that? Well, let's just say sleeper's overrated. Notebook, tape, mobile phone. Good thing the phone didn't break. I placed these 3 things on table while flashbacks of my eyes nearly falling out of my head from working all night haunt me. Okay, that's everything. We've got a lot of work to do before it gets dark. After careful consideration, this seems to be the only way. The store manager handed out a list with things that needed to be acquired before sundown. It's mostly paper and pens, a large piece of white cloth, various paints, and a few other gadgets that you will find in a craft shop. Scarlet is back by the afternoon. As the 2 girls return from their shopping trip, Scarlet is on the 2nd floor with the store manager preparing paint buckets. The 2nd floor once served as a storage room, but now it's been emptied. Several objects and materials have been used to seal off most of the corners of the room little by little, turning the once sharp angles into a smooth surface. Only one corner has been left unsealed. The whole contraption makes the room look like it's under construction. The store manager described the procedure and the thought process behind it beforehand. It's to block the scaly silkworm and limit the paths it can take. The store manager feels as if he suddenly gained a lot of insight into the matter. Things seem clearer somehow. The chant has been carefully recorded, and the store manager has gathered all information passed down by the Taoist priest. The scaly silkworm always appears in the corners of a room. It also hides there, moving so swiftly that it doesn't even touch the ground. The only logical conclusion is to seal off the room, to limit its movements while simultaneously being able to keep track of it. Cecile once asked the store manager about the contents of the storage room, or better yet, the lack thereof. His reply was short and swift. He had entrusted an acquaintance to find a moving company to sell things off. Now Cecile and Eloise are busy drawing the rune constellation. They are unfamiliar with all these types of mysterious symbols. Before today, all they knew about Taoist priests came from the tales and movies, which said they carried special swords and yellowed parchment to cast out evil spirits. However, as is so often the case, reality and entertainment couldn't be further apart. There's never just one clear-cut path to the truth, but people tend to get caught up in the concept of rationality and realism when imagination allows for so much more. People tend to shut things out like that. It's too bad, but ultimately that's just human nature. Ignorance is bliss. This rune constellation, drawn from the store manager's memory, is not the same as the one Cecile saw on the temple doors during her hallucination. These runes have meandering, sinuous lines like crawling worms. However, they are not the most important part of the ceremony. The white cloth is spread out on the ground, with a large number of nonsensical patterns painted on it. Circular shapes are discernible, but all in all, it still looks chaotic and cluttered. According to the store manager, this particular set of runes was once cast into metal whenever the ceremony was to be held. During the ceremony, all Taoist priests under the influence had to stay within the circle of runes. It served as a means of protection against the scaly silkworm. Engraving metal seems a little far-fetched, so this is about as close as we can get to the original thing. There's not a lot of space in this room, but everybody gave it their best. In the end, they all agreed to split up the work between them, allowing Eloise and Cecile to work on the smaller runes first. Since there's no telling if any of it will work, the two girls tried to place the runes together in as dense a fashion as possible, just in case. The pencil outline was filled in with marker. Luckily, modern ink doesn't leak easily. From a distance, it looks like one big mess, but fortunately, the results are quite satisfactory. The prototype the store manager drew on paper is quite eye-catching, and the girls did a great job. If that can be counted as effective, it's not all bad. Looking at the dozen or so circles cascading across the ground, Cecile feels quite empowered. She's thankful that she chose to trust the store manager instead of hiding something from him. He's gone above and beyond to help her. He even prepared several recordings of the chant with different kinds of equipment. Since the Tao was spoken in old dialect, the store manager made alternative versions just in case. Without his and Scarlett's extensive help, the girls would have probably slipped up somewhere along the way and made a deadly mistake, even if they had somehow stumbled upon this solution. All in all, it's a mystery how the store manager is so familiar with these kinds of things. Summoning otherworldly beings and partaking in ancient rituals is hardly part of someone's daily routine or some leisurely hobby, is it? The same goes for Scarlett. Even Cecile realized how crazy it all sounds from the very beginning. Yet Scarlett just went along from day one, working alongside the store manager, raising questions, finding answers, as if we're all just another day on the job. Even though all of this must be new to them, they both seem like seasoned professionals. No matter what they find, they adjust quickly and come up with new solutions. There's no reason at all for Cecile to doubt someone who is helping her so selflessly, but she can't help it. But why exactly? This isn't the right time to think about it. It's nearly 8 p.m., and if things go according to plan, the action is about to begin. Cecile is the first to walk into the room. Are you ready? Eloise is sitting in the middle of the circle, picking up some scattered scraps. Half a dozen incense sticks are laid out on the ground around her. This seems to be all she had left, and with things about to get serious, it's all or nothing. Then again, following the store manager's guidelines is probably the best way to avoid the worst. Cecile carefully steps inside the rune circle as well, but unlike Eloise, she doesn't sit down. Cecile goes over the plan once more. To put it simply, all we have to do is recreate that incident at the temple, only we'll be prepared properly and armed with knowledge that we can use to gain the upper hand. We control the situation this time. I know that you can't walk close to the water and not expect your shoes to get wet, but we know what went wrong last time. There are two major differences when we compare this to the failed ceremony from back then. First of all, the priest's brother's room where it all happened was in no way prepared. It didn't have any protective runes. Secondly, they didn't repeat any protective chants, which gave the scaly silkworm enough time to get comfy in the corners. Even if only by accident, they basically created perfect conditions for it to roam freely. The priest survived in the end, even though he was in the room. That tells us that the runes may not be the key. Singing the chant 3 times seems to be part of the ritual that mattered most. If done according to the Taoist method, one recital of the chant takes 1 minute, so we need at least 3 minutes for that part of the ceremony. Of course, we may or may not need more time, and it may not even be about the number of repetitions, but we need a rough estimate at least. There's no sugarcoating the risk. In order for the monster to actually enter this room, one of us needs to use the incense again. We still don't know that much about lilac grass, but we know that inhaling the smoke is an integral part of it. This time, we're in full control of who inhales the incense. I did my best to trim the shape of the incense stick for it to burn more slowly. Also, the smoke shouldn't sink into the ground more easily. Whoever's our bait stays close to the ground, while another keeps an eye on the overall situation. It should all be done as quickly as possible. The smoke will begin to thicken, after all. If both people lose consciousness at the same time, that would mean certain doom. To put it bluntly, lure it out and stay calm. When it emerges, use the things we prepared to delay it as long as possible. Delay it. Cecile looks at the various items around her. They are covered with paper of the same color as the floor to camouflage them. Amazing how much they manage to hide from prying eyes. Using these things to interrupt a sinister monster that slaughters humans for fun is like threatening a polar bear with a toothpick. However, the runes copied from the ones we found at the Craneview Temple might give them additional powers. A human's worst fear is always uncertainty, and this is no exception. Although you were the one who asked for help yesterday, it seems like you'll be protecting me instead. Since she had the most extensive experience with incense, Eloise volunteered to play the bait. However, yesterday proved to Cecile that even experience doesn't protect you from its dangerous effects. But she had no valid reason to tell Eloise not to do it. Eloise. Yes? After this is all over, let's sit down and talk, okay? Her phone starts beeping. She tries to cover up her embarrassment. With the store manager's lighter in hand, she lights the incense stick one by one. Cecile frowns at the all-too-familiar smell. She waves her hands around to get rid of the smoke, which is indeed thinner than usual, meaning that her preparations were effective. If she doesn't deliberately inhale the smoke, it should be possible to stave off the effects a little longer. Eloise reaches for the incense and places it right next to her. Then she lies down sideways on the ground, her hands folded as if in prayer. Now it's up to you, Cecile. Her words already sound as if she's struggling to speak clearly. Yes, don't worry, Eloise. Cecile gets up and turns on the playback of her phone's recorder. Despite knowing that it's purely psychological, Cecile takes a deep breath. She knows that these are about to be the longest 3 minutes of her life. It's quiet all around them. Even though the recording is playing, the entire room seems to stand still. When will it emerge? Eloise doesn't know the answer to that. Her chest is heaving a little. Her palms are sweaty as Eloise unconsciously rolls up the silk thread in a loop, only to loosen it again, over and over. Store manager's hoarse voice gradually melts into the background as he continues his chanting. The air is heavy. Eloise's eyelids are fluttering. This isn't good, but Cecile knows she did everything she could. Huh? A tingling, stinging sensation. Despite there being no light in the room, its corners suddenly turn even darker, blacker than black. A cloud of smoke rises. Cecile instinctively waves around to disperse it, only to realize that the smoke isn't coming from the incense on the ground. This strange purple smoke doesn't adhere to the laws of physics. It doesn't even have a source. The air feels like a sponge soaked in ink, letting out smoke every time it's squeezed. Almost as if it were sentient, the purple smoke condenses into a corner, then a crunching sound, like fabric being torn. Cecile stares at the point where the smoke has gathered and holds her breath. The darkness deforms and warps again, sending a chill through the room. No pupils, no eyelids, no shimmering white in the dark. But an eye is an eye. Cecile recognizes it immediately. She could never forget. It is here. The enigmatic monster seems to be adapting to its surroundings. Little by little, it is squeezing itself out of the fabric of darkness, its angular body spreading out, arching in the air. Or arcing in the air. This weird, bizarre being conflicts with the natural rules of our world. It is composed entirely of various sharp angles, but its surface is glistening with liquid reflections. One section of its body is covered in weird, scattering eyes, the closest thing to what we would call a head. This thing is abnormal from the very core of its existence. Cecile is sure of it. Without any warning, a cold, sticky feeling starts to wander up Cecile's ankles. It feels as if melted ice water is being injected into her veins, and as if she's becoming weightless, as if she's free-falling. The acid in her stomach is building up. It's a sickening sensation. The veil of everything she has come to accept and know as reality is mercilessly torn away. The last small sense of security she had left vanishes. Her sanity crumbles as her body folds and falls apart within itself. She would like to close her strained eyes, if only to escape the horrifying mad gaze, but she eventually swallows the fear and tries to maintain eye contact. Sharp, bone-like appendages are protruding from its body, their razor-sharp tips giving the impression that they could rip time and space itself apart. That must be a kind of claw, Cecile quietly thinks to herself. She can't see anything that resembles an ear, but God only knows how this thing functions. Its physics-defying body is strangely twisting and rearranging every couple of seconds. Upon closer inspection, she realizes the different shapes are not directly connected to one another. They seem to be loosely hanging in space, ignoring all the constraints of common sense. She readies herself for what's next. Cecile pulls on a thin thread, and the slight tearing sound of adhesive tape can be heard from further away. The remaining corners of the room have also been covered with tape, which maintains a subtle tension that, once unfastened, creates a curve in the corner. With a bit of luck, it might be possible to cut off the creature's entrance. However, it doesn't exactly work out as planned. The appendages on the morphing monster's body easily cut through everything in its path. The parts of it that have already successfully emerged can't be removed by simply erasing the corners. With a disturbing crackling sound, like tendon snapping, the thing raises its head and looks around. It takes but a second to spot its target. A small puddle of liquid, much like water, is forming on the ground in front of Cecile. The creature's body has splattered into a pulpy, bony puddle, as if it's been thrown against a window with full force. For a short moment, it reminds Cecile of a scene at a terrible car accident. Something seems to have been viciously ripped from the air. Despite the fact that she didn't inhale, her lungs start bulging, filling up like a balloon. She can feel a faint heat rising from beneath her feet. Smoke is rising up from the ground. The runes are already showing signs of damage just after one attack. They can only delay it for a little bit, Cecile thinks to herself. These runes are just a small help. They can't be relied on for protection. Weird crunching and clicking noises are coming from the monster's unnatural body as it retreats back into a dark corner. The thing is floating through the air like some otherworldly god, the corners of the room being the entrance to its kingdom. Cecile is drenched in cold sweat. Nobody really knows what the original runes were for. With no practical knowledge about them, this right here is the only way to see how they actually work. The store manager only explained it vaguely before. Cecile can't blame him. Even if she understood the principle herself, it would still be difficult to explain it to someone else. The nightmarish creature is behaving as if it isn't bound to this world at all and is free to traverse through space, the space covered in runes being the sole exception. It's impossible to keep track of its movements or understand them. Its body defies common sense, twisting and morphing in the most disturbing ways. Its actions and movements are ferociously rapid, and its piercing eyes render any attempts at hiding from it futile. Does any of it really have an effect? If anything, it looks as if the monster avoiding the spot seems to be a conscious decision. While Cecile is still lost in thought, the monster attempts a second strike. This time, the ground shakes under the vicious attack. Various items are violently thrust into the air, reducing to nothing but dust. Cecile lowers the threads in her hands. It is not surprising that the Taoists fell victim to this ferocious beast. This isn't a fight that can be solved by brute force, even if you have proper weapons at hand. If anything, rash and violent decisions will only make things worse. The runes seem to be keeping up for now, despite showing first signs of cracking under pressure. They've already surpassed everyone's expectations. There's still more to be done. Cecile holds her breath and kneels down again. Then she starts drawing something on the ground. A third attack. No thinking, just drawing. The moment the pen touches the ground, it moves as if it has a mind of its own. Cecile quickly fills in the parts of the runes that have disintegrated. The monster is now rampaging outside of the rune circle, frustrated. The store manager's plan to ambush it doesn't seem to be working out as planned, but it's too late to worry about that. There's faint ringing in the distance. 1 minute has passed. A sudden impact from the side. Another one. It's still holding up so far. Despite the heat, the marker is still drawing runes on the ground. The monster thrashes around, smashing against the barrier, making it hard for Cecile to keep up. There are 12 sets of overlapping rune patterns on the ground. Each impact damages 2 or 3 of them. The process differs depending on the pattern, but Cecile manages to repair 1 or 2 at a time. Luckily, the ink is withstanding the inexplicable heat. Although the ancient pioneers of this ceremony were more professionals than everyone here combined, modern science and technology do have their advantages. To avoid inhaling too much incense, Cecile quickly gets up, gasping for air. It's almost like coming up for air when swimming, but through supernatural smoke instead of water. Nobody expected this to turn into a deadly game of tug-of-war, but there's still hope. Now that they know how it works, they're determined to stand their ground and finish this. What? Dizziness sweeps over Cecile, as if she were suffering from extreme vertigo. Her vision goes dark. She falls to her knees and tries to break her fall by reaching towards the ground. This is dangerous. If she falls and lands outside of the safe space, her left hand seems to dig into the ground, beyond the boundary. She instinctively retracts her hand and pushes herself back off the ground immediately. There's a gaping hole in the center of her palm, white bones and pulsing veins clearly visible. There's no pain, no bleeding, and whatever fluid is dripping out of the wound disappears into thin air. The malicious creature flies to one side in annoyance, readying itself once again. As Cecile realizes what's happening, her legs turn weak. What kind of bite is that? Cecile is so confused right now that she can't think clearly. She tries to regain her footing, but she stumbles and kicks the marker away from her. With a sharp, abrupt hiss, the creature rushes towards it, knowing it to be the girl's only hope. It is no match for the creature's attack. The marker breaks apart. Black ink splashes across the room like blood. Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Cecile screams, but dares not reach out again. Eloise is still lying beside her, her clothes torn from the many attacks. Cecile glances over to check on her. Fortunately, she's still unharmed. The monster twists its head and looks back at Cecile, its whirly appendages ready for another attack. But then it stops in midair, and its many teeth scatter into countless strands of blue silk. Now it looks like a jellyfish pressed flat against the wall of a glass tank. It's playing around, trying to provoke its prey. Meanwhile, the inky runes on the floor are frothing and producing a pungent smell after having blocked so many of the creature's attacks. What should they do? They've long lost the marker and there's only one pencil, a pair of scissors and some paper cutters left within the rune circle. The pencil is used for rough sketching, but preparing the rune patterns with it would be nearly impossible. It's nowhere near as effective as the ink marker. However, the runes won't hold much longer if nothing is done about it. Maybe her mind is just playing tricks on her, but Cecile can hear a faint wailing from somewhere. The most important thing now is time. Stay calm. Stay calm. With each attack, the runes are damaged even more. The ink boils until parts of the runes simply evaporate into thin air. There's nothing here that Cecile could use to quickly replace the evaporated ink. Even if there was, it seems like the runes would remain fragile either way. But what about something other than drawing? Cecile is surprised at her own rationality. Her breathing is calm and her thoughts are clear. There might be another way to make the runes more sustainable. If a whole set of runes could be engraved on the surface, it might work. Even if the ink ultimately disappears, the engraved parts would last. The hard floor isn't an option. That much is clear since they tested it in the afternoon. All she has is a pencil and a knife. So the pencil then? Although nowhere near as large as the radius of the rings on the ground, at least the pencil has a cylindrical shape. By drawing the runes much closer together and compressing the whole pattern, they could indeed be carved into the pencil. Even though the pencil can't be stood upright on the ground, the scaly silkworm can't reach the space near the runes, so it might just buy everyone some time. That's it! The ground is shaking, and the creature seems to have found its rhythm. The pauses between its attacks are getting shorter. The self-composed cage seems to be crumbling. The phone starts beeping once again. The second minute has passed, and about half of the prepared defenses have already been destroyed. There's no way to retrieve what has been lost. Soon there won't be enough space for one person to lie down. Cecile helps Eloise into a sitting position while she leans against her body for support. She throws the notebook aside, picks up the pencil and the knife and starts engraving as fast as she possibly can. There must not be any straight lines, no corners, and most importantly, no mistakes. Cecile has never been under so much pressure. The clock is ticking. She barely even looks at what she's doing as she moves the knife across the pencil. A piece of wood, less thick than her pinky finger. No matter how driven and motivated, anyone else probably wouldn't have been able to do this. Thanks to Cecile's artistic skills, though, she has nimble fingers. She's making it count. Disturbed by what's going on, Eloise suddenly frowns and starts to whisper. Cecile responds casually, but doesn't get any more answers from Eloise. It was probably just a nightmare, induced by the hallucinations. Poor Eloise. No matter how hard she tried to fight it, the incense around her is still eating away at Cecile's self-control. Something is floating in the corners of her eyes. It kind of looks like a row of British Guards' bearskin hats. Hallucinations? Cecile can't worry about that right now. An unrelenting shockwave brings her back to reality. Another one of those, and this whole room might start coming down on top of everyone. Cecile is even more determined now. The beast is circling its prey, occasionally picking up whatever objects are close to it and tearing them to pieces. It looks like even supernatural creatures get frustrated sometimes. Cecile adjusts her position to make more room for Eloise. The safe zone has shrunk once again. So many protected runes have have broken by now that Cecile can already feel the monster's vile breath on her face. It extends its sharp appendages again, stretching its bony teeth around Cecile in an effort to demonstrate its impending victory. It was my decision. She had nothing to do. Eloise is still immersed in her hallucinations. She twists and turns her body uneasily. In spite of the situation, Cecile still manages to squeeze out a bitter smile. It seems like all the trouble started the moment she joined the art club. Although she ignored the provocations back then, Cecile could never forget how sad and scared she'd been. Without Eloise's help, she wouldn't have made it through the bullying and harassment. She still remembers the day Eloise stood up for her for the first time. It was a tense moment. What Eloise did will always mean a lot to her. Who would have thought that that moment would create such a close friendship? And who would have thought that friendship would cause her so much pain? Cecile finishes the last engraving with tears in her eyes. A loud, unpleasant sound fills the room. This time the monster seems determined. All of a sudden, thousands of whirling tentacles extend right up to Cecile's face. Cecile begins to panic at the creature's bizarre morphing. She takes a deep breath, forgetting about the incense around her. However, someone else manages to react even faster. Stop it! Although she still hasn't fully recovered yet, and is shaking on her feet, Eloise stands up. She steps directly in front of Cecile to shield her, the last line of defense. This isn't how Cecile pictured things to turn out. Eloise! Eloise ignores Cecile's shouts and stays where she is. It looks almost as if she's in a trance. No matter what. Today's her birthday. Watch out! A large shadow pounces out of the darkness with incredible force. A burst of wind blows Cecile's hair out of her face. She can feel a sudden impact, but there's no sound at all. It hurts! Sharp pain shoots through her arms like lightning, and several bones seem to be cracked. Her shoulders make a crunching sound when she moves, but she tries to ignore it. Even the slightest push would make her fall to her knees right now. It looks as if Cecile's improvised rune pencils saved both their lives. A small thing like that proved nearly as effective as the large runes, enough to survive an all-out attack, at least this once. Why did you... Whispering to herself, Cecile takes a look at Eloise, who's struggling to get back up from the ground. She's overcome with emotion. Eloise, why did... I don't know what to say. After the many attacks, Cecile feels as if she can follow the thing's thought process by now. Although it's still attacking fiercely, Cecile can sense its exhaustion. Even a creature like that has its limits. The chanting in the background is nearly over. The third minute is almost up. Once that happens, the creature might finally be soothed by the mysterious tune, just like it was in the past. The moment of truth. Cecile holds tightly onto the pencil. There's a radiant, blinding burst of light. Staring directly into its eyes makes its actions a little more predictable somehow. Knowing what's going to come next could give them a fighting chance. Not today, Mr. Monster. Cecile murmurs to herself as she shakes her bloody arm covered in cuts. I know what I need to do now. This time the attack came from the left, just as Cecile thought. The monster is cunning and is targeting the injured Eloise instead. Knowing where the next attack might come from gives Cecile an advantage, however, small it may be. The monster twists and turns, snapping through the air like a whip. She's beginning to feel the blood loss from her arm, but Cecile clenches her teeth and stares at the whimpering creature, refusing to let go of the object in her hand. The pencil is boiling hot. It feels as if she's gripping a scorching iron. The stench of burning skin drifts up her nose. But that doesn't matter now. The creature suddenly changes its strategy. It floats through the air, tearing away pieces of its own body with sharp, pointed claws. Pulpy green liquid drips over Cecile's head. Cecile raises her left arm in an attempt to keep the liquid away from her and Eloise, but it's too much and her frame is too small to block it. The sticky green pus drips onto her skin and immediately creeps along it like a living thing. It burns through Cecile's soft skin, rushing through her veins, boiling her blood. The entire left side of her body seems to be burning up and melting away, while the right side is strangely frigid and cold. It feels as if somebody's hammering nails straight into her heart. If she wants to live, she has to. It can't all have been for nothing. Hey, it's almost time, right? If you don't hurry, I'm going to run. There's the sound of something ripping and the bizarre mountain of angles assumes a shape again. Accompanied by an extremely sharp howling sound, the monster's body strikes out once more. Cecile extends her left arm. The toxic fluids have already burnt her skin, so offering up some more won't make a difference. Intentionally letting the beast come closer is a lot harder than she thought. Cecile's left arm is almost completely numb, and the whirlwind of lashing tentacles nearly reaches the tip of her nose. At the critical moment, Cecile bites down on the pencil hard. Although the shock of an impact almost cricks her neck and her teeth turn dull with pain, she remains on her feet. More than a dozen pair of eyes are directly facing her. Would you feel better without those things? Cecile does her best to keep her brain from processing the pain pulsating through her body. Fine, whatever happens, happens. Maybe the incense is showing its effect, but her expression is becoming less tense and she smiles. With her hand covered in blood oozing from her cut arm, she quickly draws a circle mark on the monster's forehead. The roof starts spinning. Or is it the whole world? A warm sensation is spreading through her lower abdomen, as if she's been punched in the gut. Cecile falls to the ground and is unable to muster any strength to get back up. She turns her head to the side, wanting to see if Eloise is okay. No longer strong. Can't know. Who is Eloise talking to? There's another ringing sound. At last the darkness swallows her whole. A hint of warmth gently sweeps over her body like a soft wave. How long has it been? Her vision is still blurry and she's unable to process what happened. What she does know, however, is that right now there's nothing to worry about. Only now is that this weird, unsettling feeling in the back of her mind has fully gone away does she realize how long the creature has haunted her, nestled in her thoughts. Just thinking about it is enough to give her a headache. What exactly did she do last night? Cecile is unsure whether she even wants to remember. A cold, bone-crunching pain still lingers in her chest. But she doesn't feel as if she's being watched any longer. That should be considered a success, no matter the circumstances. The floor is a mess, covered in sharp scratches, and the walls are speckled with ink and other liquids as if a bomb went off inside this room. Cecile is lying on her back, covered with a thick fleece blanket. Tears are shimmering in her eyes. They really do taste like salt, she thinks to herself as a single tear rolls over her lips. It looks very improvised, but her wounds are covered with gauze and bandages. The strong smell of disinfectant hangs in the air. She looks around and spots a note next to her. It says, "Good morning. I'm waiting for you downstairs." The paper appears to have been ripped out of the store manager's notebook. It's already starting to turn a little yellow. Even though he's taking care of a bookstore, his handwriting is atrocious. Cecile almost feels bad about thinking that way, but it's true. She quickly discards the thought. She already owes him so much, and without his help, Eloise and her probably wouldn't have lived to see the sun come up today. Asking so many favors of him, ruining the whole room. Cecile feels terrible about it. She makes a mental note to apologize to him for her behavior at the earliest opportunity. Her left wrist and shoulder are swollen. Cecile moves around to make sure she hasn't dislocated anything, and to make sure it still doesn't hurt. 3 minutes against a creature like that. She can count herself lucky if this is the full extent of her injuries. What is she going to tell her father when she gets back home today? Cecile is still a little worried, but she's feeling a lot calmer already. Cecile decides to let that hard-earned peace and quiet sink in for a little while longer. Oh, wow. A lot of time has passed. To be completely honest, well, I don't know what to do. Oh. Well. No pain, no bleeding. It just doesn't seem right, but I suggest we wait and see how things turn out. It would be weird to go to a doctor with these kinds of symptoms and not be able to properly explain how you got them in the first place. The creature pierced a large hole through Cecile's left hand, and although the entire back of her palm is laid bare, she is able to move her hand as if the bone wasn't touched at all. The way she's able to make a fist and almost fit 3 fingers through the hole is truly unsettling. For now, let's cover it up with bandages and see if anyone asks. And if anyone asks, say you had an accident. You have to watch out for infection. I know a guy who might know a way to get it to heal properly. Looks like it's up to him to come up with something. Oh, and I'm sorry. Sorry for how things escalated and how far you had to push yourselves. And about your hand. Maybe when that strange guy delivers the next batch of books, I can ask him about it. Anyway, it would be best if you let yourselves heal first, regain some strength. You want to stay here, or do you want to go back to school? I don't feel too comfortable about you not showing up there at all. Not showing up there all day. Well, I accidentally turned off my phone yesterday and just realized I received so many messages about it's about to burst. Eloise, are you really okay? Let's just make up an excuse. I think we should go back and explain it to the teachers. Well, that's one possibility, yeah. Sounds fine by me. Just promise me not to cause any more trouble. Not for yourself, not for others. For your own sake. Then we'll hurry there now and come back later to make amends. Promise. Yes, we'll do that. I'm really sorry. Alright, just give me enough time to have a good cry while I think about who to call to help me clean up this mess. And just like that, the two students hurry out of the store and head to school. In the end, they're both still kids. As much as Scarlett hates annoying children, Cecile and Eloise clearly don't fall under that category. They still have a long road ahead of them, and if they struggle along the way, it's okay to help them out in whatever way possible. Just a few days were enough to draw me out of the quiet and safe life I've been leading. Who could have known a single conversation would lead to such adventure? Then there's a whole mess upstairs to take care of somehow. Just thinking about it makes my head throb. Staying here is a, shall we say, necessity, so I might as well keep the place tidy. So, it looks like as if things have been resolved. What do you mean resolved? We still don't have a cure for the wound. We can't just let Cecile run around with a hole in her hand for the rest of her life. When did you get here anyway? Who knows how long he's been standing there already. He bows his head in my direction, a pile of books in his arms. A pleasant afternoon to you. If you're talking about an open wound, I would suggest giving up on it. These beings are simply passing through our dimension, and time and space itself could not comprehend those wounds they cause. However, since they are only travelers, our world will forget them eventually. At that point, it will become even more difficult to keep track of them. You sure seem to know a lot about them. How peculiar. An uneasy feeling spreads through my chest. Just a moment ago, I was prepared to come up with a clever way of getting information out of him. But now I don't feel like it. Anymore. Thanks to an old book you gave me, the girls weren't torn to pieces by that thing called scaly silkworm. Should I thank you for that? Please don't give me that book. I would have liked to assist you in person, but you are well aware that I'm not allowed to go beyond this floor. He's right. Even the stairs are off limits to him. Even if he gave it everything he's got, he could only take one step before being pushed back by an invisible force. It was only after the accident that I found out that his legs had been replaced with a pair of prosthetics. What happened to Hermitage way back when? Can't even imagine. Nowadays, the building resembles a cursed city. No one can leave. No one can enter. You may not realize it, but your instincts have always been sharp. It was a very wise decision not to get involved. He brushes some dust off his hat. How so? The scaly silkworm appears in this dimension by entering and exiting from a certain perspective, and you will find that everyone has one. Consider, for example, the eyes. Learned scholars died tragically at home. Kings were mysteriously murdered in their castles. Witchcraft researchers suddenly perished, all of them torn and cut. Their henchmen and assistants didn't always share that luxury. Many were left with a large gaping hole in their face. So it can enter our dimension through a human face? I'm afraid it's a legitimate, valid theory. Moreover, it's been documented that all sorts of anomalies and deformities have developed on the victims over time. It's more than enough to drive them mad, and ultimately kill them. They call it the Devil's Whisper, an apt name for the condition, if you ask me. A shiver goes down my spine as I listen to these stories. The Crane Temple Taoist described the silkworm as a storm of unpredictable shapes. Its destructive urges led me to believe that it is primitive. However, it is actually a highly intelligent being. You can't afford to be reckless against an enemy who doesn't even adhere to our concept of life and death. Things looked really grim, and it was a gamble, but my faith in the ruins was well placed. Our ancestors have treated us well. Thanks to the ruins, the girls' lives were saved. Otherwise, they would have met the same cruel fate as the priests back then. Runes? What are you referring to? Protective runes carved into the floor. The priests seem to have relied on them to ward off the silkworm during the ceremony, too. Although they weren't that durable, they still proved most useful. Is that so? How intriguing. That's new even to me. There haven't been any examples of symbols being used against silkworms in the past. Well, this is roughly what it looks like. We overlap this pattern a dozen times, just to be safe. I take a tattered draft of the runes from the table and hand it to him. He seems quite interested, gazing at the pattern as intently as if he wanted to burn through the paper. But then he frowns. If I remember correctly, this is just the type of common hexagram often used in southern Taoism. It's very messy, distorted even. It's harmless, and doesn't carry any power as far as I can tell. Are you sure it really had an effect on the silkworm? Well, to be honest, I don't really know. It did save the two girls, and judging by the havoc that was caused upstairs, I don't think they had enough strength left to make up a lie like that. In any case, it's all quite outrageous, almost like a tug of war without a rope. The silkworm destroyed all the protective precautions I put in place. Without them, would Cecile even have had a chance of surviving for 3 minutes? Perhaps I'm overreacting. Since nobody has proven otherwise, it may be possible that the hexagram is effective against the silkworm. Under what circumstances would you usually use this hexagram? Well, it has various applications. Since it has no real function and exists only as a symbol, it is often found on various decorative items. Not as distorted as in your drawing, though. Oh, that explains that, I guess. What's the matter? It's nothing. I'm starting to believe that I've just been really lucky lately. Luck is never more than a prerequisite, and no amount of luck would help if you didn't put in the effort. Compliments won't do me any good. I realize that. I just want you to be fully aware of how much of a difference you can make. He checks the bookshelves one by one, looking satisfied. Accurate categorization, no missing volumes. You were born to do this. Why are you helping me? You mean these books? Forget about taking me in for a moment. From the very beginning, you seemed to know what was going on with Cecile. If that's really the case, wouldn't it have been better to be straightforward about it? We eat, drink, and walk according to what we were taught, but most of the world is foolish and lacks self-reflection, so we should be careful. The deliverer bows his head as he quietly recites this line. Sounds like some kind of lesson. It is the motto that a group of shady individuals use to keep themselves motivated. Even though its origins elude them nowadays, they are still more careful than anyone else, even to this day. Unfortunately, I can't distance myself from them for a variety of reasons. His tone is bitter and seems to be hiding a lot of regret. When I was younger, I followed them blindly, often into situations I shouldn't have been part of. If it hadn't been for coincidence, I still might be in the dark about that. I never assumed to call myself innocent, but that doesn't mean I was happy to stand by and watch them do what they did. Is that what you're hoping? Is that why you were hoping to help? The deliverer nods silently. Well, I'll be honest then. If helping Cecile brings you some kind of benefit that I don't know about, I won't bother telling you about anything else unless it's out of the ordinary. You're my landlord after all. However, in an environment like this, I can hardly guarantee good quality work. This time around, luck was the only thing that made this a success. Don't you have a better alternative than that? You seem to be overestimating my abilities. Every single brick and tile here is priceless to me, and you sleep peacefully upstairs every night, while I can't even take a look outside, or inside. Is this place that precious to you? He gives me a sad look and speaks in a serious tone of voice. It is my home. It is the only place I find peace and stability. However, that is why I am able to place you here with such confidence. For me, this is the last chance that God has given me. You seem to be having a hard time with it, though. As long as your results live up to my expectations, the pain I'm feeling is just part of the process. That statement already sounds much more like himself again. I stretch my hands and drill the cigarette into the ashtray. So, what else can I do for you? When the time comes, you'll know. All you have to do is do what you think is right. He picks up his briefcase and turns around to leave the store. Until then, just hang in there. Hang in there. I look down at the notebook on my desk. In just a few days, it's already been filled with a multitude of notes and memos. Once they've been turned on, some switches are difficult to turn off again. We could all use a break right now. Eloise? Eloise! What? Sorry, I was distracted. Did you see anything strange? No, I was just curious. I saw someone walk by who looked familiar. Huh? You mean you saw someone you know near the bookstore? I don't think anyone from school would hang out there. Maybe the clothes were just similar. It's not particularly unusual to be wearing a trench coat in this weather, but something felt strange. Really? I didn't even notice. Never mind. It's too late to do anything about it now. The girl nods and continues towards the station. It's sunnier than usual, but the weather hasn't been good these last few days. There are many things she'd like to say, but the words are stuck in her throat, and she can't get them out. Eloise can't help but think about how messy things had turned out. She feels as if everything is her fault, but she's still overwhelmed by recent events. She has the courage to accept any punishment, but it never came. It's as if she herself has become the person she used to hate so much, which makes her feel incredibly hollow inside. She sees the way Cecile walking next to her, light on her feet and unburdened. She feels somewhat relieved, but also selfishly filled with despair. She has to face it. She can no longer choose to avoid it. Cecile, as it turns out, I'm not going to forgive you just like that. Is this really what it's going to be like? I don't want you to misunderstand, so I thought it would be best to make myself clear. I have no intention of forgiving you just like that. Cecile stands in front of Eloise, feet firmly planted on the ground, no sign of doubt on her face. The autumn breeze gently lifts up her slightly disheveled hair, revealing a few red marks on her face. For the first time, Eloise is a little uncomfortable looking into Cecile's clear, determined eyes. It used to be the other way around. Honestly, that's okay. It's not over yet. We're not the only ones in the art club. That sentence shakes her up even more than anything else. It's not like... You acquired a lot of lilac grass in the past, right? I can't just ignore the fact that you used something so dangerous. Cecile tries to smile as the sun shines down on her, spreading its warmth across the entire road. I can forgive you. It's just one more decision I have to make, as things are, it's not that hard for me anymore. But, like the store manager said, forgiveness is never the end of the matter. There's no difference between forgiving someone and running away. Forgiveness alone proves nothing, just like running away doesn't either. Trying to make a change is the only thing that makes a difference in this world. Look, what would people think if we just made up and pretended that nothing happened? Eloise had paid a high price to prove herself, but it's true that there's more than one person involved in this situation. But the seeds that were planted don't just disappear. I'm the one responsible for all this. I shouldn't be the one to say this, but Cecile, you really do care about others too much. I don't think so. If mistakes were made, it's our duty to solve them, even if we weren't responsible for them. I don't plan on shouldering anyone else's burden. I'll listen to apologies, and I'll stay reasonable, always. The same goes for you, Eloise. If we're really still friends, then come with me and talk to our classmates. Cecile seems to have prepared this speech a long time ago. Eloise's vision becomes a little blurry as she watches her friend talk so seriously. So, Eloise? Hey, are you alright? Well, what? Yeah, I'm obviously... Eloise can no longer hold back her emotions. The sorrow, the pain, the regret. They never went away after all, and now they're bursting out with her tears. Even I can't forgive myself for some things, but you can. Stop it. It has nothing to do with her. But it's her birthday. I remember someone saying something like that last night, and it sure as hell wasn't me. At this school, only one person knows when my birthday is. So what exactly did you see, and who did you say it to? Cecile covers her cheeks, looking embarrassed. You want to change, right? I still have many things to learn. I want to continue this journey with you. Eloise doesn't even hear the whole sentence. The only thing she can hear is the sound of her own sobbing. Cecile gently hugs Eloise, trying her best to share her warmth. Now, we have all the time in the world to correct our mistakes, to make things right. If patience really is the key, we'll just have to be patient a little longer. If this is how we can make friends, that's motivation enough. Eloise tries to open her eyes, but all she can see is Cecile's bright smile in front of her. Besides, I owe them an apology too. After all, I still don't know everyone's name yet. Even with tears in her eyes, Eloise smiles, and the sun, along with Cecile's embrace, fills her heart with warmth. Come on, we still have a lot of things to get done. The young girl used to have one problem. She suffered from nightmares even during the day. Now she's finally found her way to true redemption. Alright, why don't we stop it there? This is audapostrophe, and you've been watching Hermitage Strange Case Files on Nintendo Switch. Yeah, I don't know if that's completely the end of the case, but boy, what a very interesting ending to the case. or at least a crescendo to the case. Yeah, I didn't expect this to actually be real supernatural monsters. I guess I thought it would just be like rumors of monsters and maybe some possessed materials that would never generate into like a monster fight. But yeah, it suddenly became very cool finally. Although the writing style certainly doesn't make sense to me in a lot of cases, and it seems like just a lot of stuff is just not written in for you and filled in for you. Again, I don't know if that's intentional or just a translation error, but either way, it still comes out to be a satisfying story in the end, and it'll be interesting to see how many case files we go through in this game. Hopefully there's more than just one. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.